Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and welcome to Sean Campbell, the CEO and founder at Cascade Insights, coming in from Oregon. Now, I've got to ask you the first question, Sean, just off the back of this this magnificent background you've got there. Looks like you've got designs of all of they're like Star Wars.
They are Star Wars. Yeah,
And
they're disc plates. So this isn't a promo for disc plate, but they're metal.
oh wow,
And so you can change them out. So like basically I have a couple different sets of disc plates that I can use for backgrounds. And I got turned on it for my son who was playing Elden Ring and he
yeah,
wanted one of them. And then I went to discplate.com and I'm like, first off, how did you guys sign all these deals with like every brand known, Marvel, everybody else? But that's a separate point. But yeah, it's kind of a cool thing because once you have it set up, you could change it up all you want, which is kind of fun.
So the obvious question from that is how much of those disc plates are a conversation starter when you're on Zoom or Teams?
I would say 75% of the time it is, which is also part of it, right? Like, and if I pan to my right,
Yeah.
there's a Japanese sword from World War II that my grandfather brought home, you know what I mean? And so like when he fought in the Philippines, and that used to be a good conversation starter because most people don't have a sword hanging over their head to the
Yeah.
upper right, you know what I mean? But yeah, as a side note, this isn't necessarily what we're going to cover. It is I think something to think about with Zoom calls, right? In the era,
Mm.
because I've led a remote company for a long time, and like it's not just thinking about your background. It is a bit like having it be a conversation starter or something interesting, but there's a fine line, right? If it's too weird, well, then nobody asks about it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And if it, like the thing with the sword, what I used to say was people would say, "Oh, where's the sword?" And I would say my grandfather brought it home from the Philippines. And it was almost like a history test, by the way, because I'm a history guy. Some people would immediately go, "Oh, I understand the reference." And other people would go, "Hmm, what? Where? Why?" And I'd be like,
What?
"Okay, well, you skipped out on history class. That's all I know." But like, I don't know. I'm not making an opinion about the sword, but I know you skipped out on history class. So,
And they're probably thinking, how did he get it through customs? Thinking,
right, totally right.
no, did he just go to
Yeah,
Philippines now?
yeah. Returning servicemen didn't really have customs. Let me put it that way. I think that's
No.
been proven through many conflicts. But anyway, that's a separate
Uh,
point.
and I must admit, it's best to have, because I'm the same. I don't like to have a virtual background because when you wave your arms around, you get excited. Your head gets lost, and your arms get lost. And if you want to show something on a piece of paper, that gets lost as well. So I'd much
Oh
prefer
yeah.
to have
Well,
just a
that's
general, real background.
yeah, agreed. And last thing on this, it's like I've said for a couple years now, it's such a shame that Zoom won the COVID wars. You know what I mean? Like, I mean that we're all suffering with, that, but like, and we'll go back and look at all these hacks, 1,000 people saying you're on mute all day long, you know what I mean? And like, weird pixelated backgrounds. And we're going to be like, really? Like,
Yes,
that's how we conducted international business? I'm unsure, but
we
it
did.
is what it is. So.
We did. So being the founder of and the CEO Cascade Insights, just to give people a bit of a sense of what that's all about, AI training, workforce enablement, and research for the AI era. You also now is it associate professor? What's your role at the uni?
Yeah, so there it is. It's evolved. Started out as adjunct, went to visiting assistant professor, recently moved to assistant professor, and I'm also the director of AI integration in the MBA program because we're AIifying the MBA program. And the short version of like, how does that work with the job is that I've always enjoyed being at the university. This
Mm,
is my third stint teaching at a university level. I taught public speaking when I was getting my master's degree at Purdue. Then I went and taught in an MBA program when my kids were young, competitive intelligence industry analysis, so like market research related topics. And then
yeah.
wanted to spend more time as my kids were growing and not on the campus. And I actually didn't really think I was going to get back to it at all. Then my son decides to go to George Fox University. I'm there and I'm like, both my kids are older now. And I'm like, hey, do you guys need adjuncts? And then that led to a conversation with the dean where I said, what are you guys doing with AI? And they're like, we are really thinking hard about AI. What do you know about AI? And then that just kind of snowballed from there. And the dean refers to me as the AI guy in the department. So my role there outside of Cascade is, teaching classes and at a couple, one is like for everybody in the business department has to go through it. Another one is like an AI consulting course. And then I do a ton of like faculty mentoring in the
Hmm.
department about like to make sure that AI is used across, different disciplines. And for me, and then we can move off this, but like, um, I've been pathologically incapable of learning something and not wanting to teach it my entire life. I mean, like literally. I mean, I probably when I was in second grade, people noticed it about me. It's like if I learned something, and it's everything, it's hobbies. Like I love fishing. So I will absolutely teach anyone fishing that comes by. You know what I mean or whatever. And at the same time it's I get way more out of it. And people say that a lot and I know they do. And people even
Yeah,
say that they say that a lot. But it is really 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 true because especially in a consulting context there's so much you get out of sitting in a room. I mean, let's be honest, I only have a master's degree with a bunch of smart PhDs, and they're asking me questions and thinking about stuff. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I never thought of that before. Like, that's a
yeah,
really cool way to frame that. So,
yeah.
so I think it's a great way to add value all the way around. If you can make time for it, it's definitely a good way to do it.
Well, we talk about this concept of being a lifelong learner, and I often say, because when I facilitate teams and so forth and programs, I'll often give the challenge to the individuals that, hey, it's great to be able to learn some new stuff or to be refreshed on a few new concepts or some frameworks perhaps you haven't used for a while. But it's only when you really get that embedded where you can teach it to somebody else and they can get a result similar to what you're getting using that it really gets exciting. So I love
Right.
that concept that if you learn something, don't hold on to it. So give it away, teach somebody else, pay it forward and leverage yourself. Now you mentioned before, Sean, that it all the way back when you were a kid, you were always the same. I'm really curious in terms of what led you down this path, and has it always been around AI your entire career, or where did it start out for you, and was there something that led you down this path of AI investigation and research?
Well, I'm 55, so if I tell you it was my whole career since second grade, you should start asking strong questions about like AI, really? Really? AI in 1970, whatever? Um, no, but if there's a thread that connects to AI is that I've always enjoyed marrying like how should technology with like real world use, right? Like
Mm,
like I've had deeper stints in technology. At one point I was a certified, this is true, I'm not trying to make it alphabet soup. I was a certified network engineer, database administrator, database developer, and programmer and trainer. So I went pretty deep in all that stuff, but I wasn't really in it for that level of depth. It was more like, okay, so how does technology really meaningfully get used by people, right? And
mm,
and what makes it not get adopted and get adopted and all that kind of stuff. So that naturally leads to a research firm that does that. And then AI comes along and I realize, there's a whole host of real human-centered problems that we are going to have to deal with this that is not normative with like a CRM or ERP rollout,
mm,
right? You know what I mean? Like those create change too, but this is different. This has a level of depth, and like that's kind of what led to a little bit of a pivot a couple years ago for us, where I was like, okay, I don't want to just do research. I want to actually teach and train and mentor and help people get over this because that's always been core for me, and it's going to be such a huge change. Like when I was talking to the dean way in the beginning, I said I just have a heart that people don't get run over by this
mm.
because that's really the issue, and that this could be companies, individuals, families, whatever. um because man, there's still people out there who think this isn't a big deal. I mean, I still meet them,
Are they the
and,
same
and I
ones
and
that
I'm
think
like
that?
and I'm like what are you talking about? It's not a big deal. Like one guy Ethan Mollick that I love to follow, he had this post out the other day. He said if it all stopped now, if it didn't get any better, like somehow magically for the first time in human history this technology never improved,
Yeah.
there would still be significant job loss in sectors. There would still be significant changes. There would still be real questions to ask. and it ain't stopping.
Mm. Well,
So that's a big thing. Anyway, go ahead.
how and I mean, there's a couple of questions in that as well because depending on who you talk to, you've got Sam Altman, you've got Elon Musk. They're all these organizations and big CEOs and tech bosses that are raising capital to invest billions in development data centers to probably win the race of AI. And depending on who you listen to, it's going to help society or it's going to completely destroy society. So, from your position in the research you do, I'd love your perspective on this because on the one hand, you hear Elon Musk talking about this fact that there'll be robots pretty much doing everything for us. So we end up
Mhm.
being almost like animals, dogs, just wondering what we're going to do with the day. And then others are saying, well, no, there's going to be a whole new industries created, which means people will be finding different things to do that are complemented by AI. So, and there's probably all these different people in the middle. So, from your perspective, just as at a meta level, what's your thoughts on where we're going and what's potentially going to happen in relation to humans and AI?
Yeah. Well, I'll do meta, but I'll do slightly below meta for a minute, just slightly below. Like, I think, you know, the World Economic Forum put out a report, and this is whether people like or dislike the World Economic Forum, it doesn't really matter. It was a good report. And they put out a report about a year ago that said, AI will disrupt and eliminate X percentage of jobs, in the thousands, millions, whatever.
Yeah,
It will go create X percentage millions of jobs. Those numbers were almost identical.
yeah,
And I think that's a fair point. I think you have to understand where you are at on that paradigm. And that
mm,
is a constantly shifting sand. Another meta point before I get to the big meta is like, um, I think to channel something a student said to me once. A student came up to me and I gave a guest lecture in another class, and I was talking about all the ways AI is going to change market research and is changing market research. Student pops up and says, "Are you okay with all this?" And I'm like, "Well, okay. Well, I mean, I'm not really responsible for it, but I know why you're asking that." And and I had this conversation that the short version of was, and even the long version is really good, but the short version was, what does a student like to do? Likes to write.
yeah,
Um, Frustrated that that's going away in certain ways. I'm like, do you like stringing prepositions together? Is that why you write? Kind of a uncertain how to respond to me. Well, no, not really. No. I mean, well, why do you write? Well, to impact people.
mm,
Okay, well, and I went up to the board and I drew a vertical rectangle and I said, if your box has a solid line at the top, you're done for. Medical
yeah,
transcriptionist is done for, right? You know what I mean? If your box has a dotted line, just get used to going up
yeah,
because the bottom of it, all the routine tasks, they're done for. And if your
hmm,
job is all routine tasks and you're just basically a human being that replaces friction,
yeah,
forget about it. It's over. So those are some meta changes that I don't think people are thinking about. Now on the meta side, like in the classes I teach, I actually regularly have a debate that the students go through. They debate each other and they go, but now that sounds fairly professorial. But what's really fascinating to me as a side note is that I will ask the students, how many of you have ever engaged in a debate in your educational career? Keep in mind, at times this is seniors,
yeah.
one kid always out of a
Wow.
whole room, which is frightening. Now maybe that's a indictment on the U.S. education system more than somewhere else, but but we're entering a world where one of the last things we get left to do is to decide
Mm,
if Musk is right? Fundamentally at some point, and even in his model, maybe the machines are all doing the deciding. And to your point, we're just a bunch of happy Labradors running around just looking for the next fun thing to do. I have two Labradors, Leo and Wrigley, right? So they live very
love it.
carefree lives, non-complicated, carefree lives. Maybe they feel complicated because they're like, where's the food all day? That's probably their level of complication, right? Why
As
can't I
labs
just eat
do.
all day,
That's
all day,
right.
And but and what we get into in the debates though are some of these real tough questions. And they're not just about you know, who what should AI companies do with content? Should they have grabbed it all? And I refer to that as the original sin of AI,
Mm,
that we are never going to hold them accountable for. They stole the internet, stuck it in a box, and gave it back to us as an AI. And we're never going to really hold them accountable for that. because the utility of what came out of it, much like other things in history, right? And
Mm.
I'm saying that it's going to will penalize them to varying degrees, but like it will never really go back in the box. But we'll talk about that. But we talk about things like UBI.
Hmm.
You know, well, how do you retrain 30% of the population who doesn't want to go own a business? Because some guys will be like, well, they just go own a business. Well, I can tell you right now, and you know this, not everybody is either skilled to own a business, even if they have all the tooling, nor do they have the interest.
Yeah.
There are people who'd rather just volunteer with their communities, engage with their families, and God bless them for that. Not everybody has to go work 90 hours a week, right?
Mm.
And so we talk about that a lot. Um, and I like to see the students wrestle with it. And I try to have open, candid conversations with my own team about it. Like I've never been Pollyanna about AI use inside the company, and I've never been like regressive about it. I've just tried to be like, look, it's changing our job, the way we
Mm.
work, and we need to deal with that.
So I guess as a founder of a research organization, you probably have to be to some degree disassociated from what's going on so that you can have that pragmatic view and just view it for what it is and then make some assessments rather than saying this is what it is and going look for information to support maybe an agenda that you've already preformed.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, one of the benefits I think of being me us, I guess, as a company is that we get to like um understand where the market's going to some extent, because we're doing research on how people are adopting AI and the resistance they're running into and everything to what you're alluding to, like the political factors and all that other
Mm.
stuff, right? And same thing when we deliver AI training to enable companies, right? It's like there are people who are resistant sitting in that training room.
Yep.
Go figure. At a university setting, there might be departments who don't really like AI use. A
Mm.
history professor is pretty challenged by AI, who only hands out essays.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and I go and I've delivered training where I red team the assignment, and I take the assignment and stick it in AI, and I'm like, I just completed it. What are you going to go do with that? And the professor says, well, I'll detect it. And I go, here's a Claude skill that writes in my voice. Can you detect it now? You know what I mean? And that's not me trying to throw shade on people who are struggling. I mean, let's back to the hard thing, right?
Yeah.
This is hard. We've never had something attack work to the level that is. And you got Musk over here who's like, well, we won't ever have to pay anything and it'll be fine and everything will be good. But I think even Musk knows, not that I know him, but even Musk knows that there is a deep valley we will go through to get to what he's talking about, even if what
Mm.
he's talking about is accurate.
Mm.
And it's not really my lane, but I always feel like I should bring this up. Whatever's happening here, if you're not really thinking about it in terms of its impact on you personally, professionally, your kids, and again, good people can disagree to the degree it's going to do it, but to simply ignore it is such a mistake. You could say the same thing almost 3x about robotics,
Yeah.
right? That's a thing that will radically change a lot of these careers that we want to say are safe, right? Your average oil change place in the States, like Jiffy Lube is a major chain, right? They don't want to go pay some kid 19 bucks an hour and workman's comp and everything else to go crawl under your car. The
Mm.
minute a robot with LiDAR can basically, change your oil, it's going to do it. And
Yep.
they won't even think twice about replacing that kid,
Yeah.
and that's a lot closer than people think it is in some ways, and so anyway, but there's lots of stuff to think about there, I guess, but
So part of me then thinks about because I'm listening to a lot of podcasts around this whole topic, and people keep going back to the industrial age and how there was a huge shift from before the industrial age started. I think there was a huge percentage. It was over 50% people working in agriculture, for example. And then the industrial age
Mhm.
happened, and then technology came in, production lines started, and then you had people working in offices. Then you had typing pools and as human beings, we've tended to adapt and embrace change at a I guess at a high level.
Agreed.
Um, and so we always find a way. So there's an equilibrium, but there's also change that is confronting because it's new and it's different, and maybe we don't know how to handle it because of what it means for us individually. So you mentioned before there'll be people that are in roles right now that perhaps are doing the manual tasks. Maybe they don't have the high level of education, but they've got a good job. So they're very self-focused on how do I hang on to that because that's where I get my meaning and my identity. If I now get replaced by a robot or an AI function that can do that in half the time or a tenth of the time or a hundredth of the time, what does that mean to me? So the human element becomes really interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, and that's the thing that back to your point about agriculture, right? I actually the last couple semesters I've opened up the class and I didn't like intend to do this kind of a TED Talky way to open a class. I just think it works, right? So it's less about that. I go up to the board and I say, on the upper left, I write a number and I say 97%. And on the lower right, I write 3%.
Yeah.
And I say, what does this represent? And a bunch of business school students, like, of course, it makes sense for that crowd, which I love and appreciate. They're like, okay, let me figure that out, right? And nobody really gets it because that's not enough data. And then I say, for the 97%, I write 1776, and then I write 2026.
Hmm.
And there's always one kid that gets it. And he says, the percentage of people in agriculture in the United States. And my point there is it took the entire life of this country, right, to transition that way. We have jobs that are going from 97% to zero in a couple years.
Yeah.
And definitely within someone's own career lifetime, and definitely within windows that are less than that,
Mm.
right? And that we're not ready for that. Like the US had this thing after World War II called the GI Bill, right? Where we basically spent all this money to retrain returning vets. It led to an explosion of college professors. It did amazing things to the economy. No one, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I could find somebody on the internet that hates the GI Bill, but I think historically it's looked at one of these like really good government spend moves in the US, right? Um, the amount of money government has to spend to retrain the populace at the level we're talking about, especially in anything remotely looking like the current economic environment, we don't have it.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing I'd say is there's a guy, Evan Armstrong. I just came across this piece by him a day or two ago, and it talks about this whole idea of job replacement, and he had a really great framework. And I pulled it up here, like so I did a little bit of multitasking while we're talking. I pulled this up. Tried to not check out on you too much, so hopefully you didn't notice. I was like, how do I look for
That's
this
all
thing
good.
without looking like I'm doing my email? Because I'm not. Well, I am. I'm in my email to go find this thing, right? But it's relevant, so it should be good. So, and I'm paraphrasing a bit what was in this post, but he goes, every knowledge workflow has something like this flow. And he
Mm.
says, a brief writer who defines what should exist, a translator who turns the brief into a spec, a producer who executes the spec, a reviewer who catches errors, a judge who decides what ships. And then he says, when an abstraction layer arrives, and we've had several over the life of humanity, but this is a big one with AI.
Yeah.
He says the brief writer gets empowered. They ship directly through prompts, like they go right to the AI. So this is like the junior role that still exists, where you're almost more like an architect. You're a little savvy that way. You can drive the AI, which is a bit what I'm aiming for when I train students and professionals, is
Mm.
like get them to that point that they can really drive AI as a director, right? And then he
Yeah.
says the translator and producer, the people who turn the brief into a spec and execute the spec, they're done, right? So this is like the person that used to, take up notes for your meeting.
Yeah.
They're dead,
Yeah.
right? The medical transcriptionist, that was the translator. And then
Yeah.
he says the judge gets promoted because judging now really matters.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I thought it was bang on. It's like and it's like a different variation on that rectangle-y thing that I did off the cuff with a student with more structure this guy has, right? And he's like, you could lay that up against um almost any job, and you would have a pretty good sense of it, I think.
Mm. So is that how you talk about rising above AI using a
No,
framework
no,
such
that's
as
that's a
that?
little different. I mean, I came into this after I came up with that. So like, but they're
Okay.
they're definitely a bit of like mental cousins, I think, like in the sense that he and I are trying to shoot for the same thing a bit. Mine is more like a way to look at a job role and say, uh, because Rise has four letters in it, right? So it's like routine tasks, just assume those are going to go to the AI.
Yeah.
Investigative tasks, think of it kind of like the researchy tasks or the ones that are a little bit of stitching data together or working in a spreadsheet more analytically, like deeper.
Yeah.
In many jobs, those are also going to go away, but depending on your job, those may still be there. Maybe the data is more sensitive or
Mm.
it's employee data that you need a human hand on, right? So, but I think eventually we'll delegate even that work to an AI pretty quickly because it was about a year ago we thought AIs couldn't work in spreadsheets effectively, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so then we go to strategy and they ask, and strategy is really an interesting one because right now we're starting to see the same thing we saw with the eye, where like people were like, no, making strategic decisions. That's
Mm.
human. People would say with certainty. And I saw somebody post something the other day that was kind of channeling the disconnect there. And he said, well, wait a minute. So if an AI can produce, I'm a sci-fi guy, so the Star Wars things, right? So multi-dimensional universes, right? So if a
Yes.
sci-fi, if an AI platform can create multi-dimensional universes, multiple scenarios, and it can weigh them, and it can rank them, and it can input a whole bunch of data and a bunch of scenarios for like sales forecasting, marketing forecasting, financial planning, take your pick. And by the way, it can give you a recommendation.
Mm.
Isn't that strategy?
Yep.
And somebody might say, well, the only thing left there is who owns the decision. Somebody has to be responsible for the decision. And I would say, yeah, I agree with you. Until we deal with fully end-to-end agentic commerce and the agents are just talking to the agents.
Mm.
And and I'd still say there's an ownership thing because somebody sent that agent off on its path, like ultimately,
Yep.
right? Unless the robots really are just in charge, right? Which
Mm.
is the different. We make bad
Are we
movies
in a
about that all the
simulation,
time.
Sean?
Right, or that, right? But that's where I don't agree with Musk. At these, I love what they're doing with Starship, but when Musk is like, we're all at a simulation, you know what I mean? I'm sure somebody's listening is like, yeah, we are, and I'm like, no, we're not.
No, we're
So,
not.
but I digress. And then the last E is engagement.
Yeah.
And that's where like, why do I teach students debate? Why do I focus on some soft skills? Why am I concerned that none of them have debated? Is like, wait a minute. If if knowledge is ubiquitous and and even working with knowledge is ubiquitous, investigation,
Mm.
strategy, right? All that stuff. Well, then you and me talking is the thing that's left.
That's it.
So we better be good at that, right? And worse yet, and I get off this soapbox a bit or editorializing, is that to be honest, the educational system and even the professional educational complex, meaning, like just on the job training from your boss, has for decades now indexed kind of the skills to borrow from that other guy's workflow, the translator producer skills,
Yeah.
right? That's what we've told people need to know. How often does your boss, except maybe in a sales context, right? Because I've trained sellers, right, at a more limited scale, like inside Cascade. What's the most important thing? The ride along, the post call debrief, the pre call brief. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I tell people when I bring them on to train them in sales, I say, you're going to talk to me
Yeah.
a lot, like way more than any other role. And I'm going to nitpick everything you said, and I'm going to praise the things you said, and I'm going to but we are going to mentor. And when am I going to be done with you talking to me? If you're lucky, a year.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Yep. Yep.
And like, but sellers get that, and certain job roles get that. But there are other job roles where they're like, they can't even conceptualize it being asked to learn those skills again,
No.
which really is crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
And it's interesting that you talk about that because one of the guys I was talking with recently has done a lot of research around how AI has affected or will be affecting sales in B2B organizations and organizations that are using AI effectively to help them write proposals, develop strategy, clear up challenges, but also value propositions. They're the ones that are going to be in front, but the ones that will surpass everybody is the ones that can still have a human conversation. So whether that's the judger, the ones that can have the conversation to actually add
Hmm.
human meaning to it, because at the strategic level, the B2B executive level, it's still today in 2026. required that you have a human-human conversation. So we're not going to be doing
Right.
multi-million dollar deals just with agentic AI
I
right now.
completely agree.
Yeah.
Although there's a million CIOs that are screaming into the wilderness now. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Agentic will kill all human interaction. You know what I mean? So like, but this isn't the CIO show. So we're
That's
fine.
right.
They
That's
just been
exactly right.
drinking the Kool-Aid.
That's
So
it. That's it. So let's just talk about that then in terms of organizations and particularly leadership as well, because I'm really conscious of how leaders can actually build teams, and maybe that in the future, even sales managers may actually have a team made up of physical people and maybe agents, AI agents that are helping
Mhm.
to fulfill requirements of the customers, do those routine tasks, but still deliver the profitability. What's your thoughts on, I guess, the management of AI and how we can structure teams, and what does the future workflow potentially look like when we've got an integration of the human elements with all the soft skills we still need to think about and the work that AI can actually do to make us more productive, make us more relevant, and actually speed up, I guess, a lot of the processes we have today.
well, a couple things. One, you're absolutely right about the fact that it will be a blend. You know, one of the things that we've started to talk about at George Fox, I mean, every professor has their own spin on how they
Yeah,
want to talk about AI, but one of the things that's very fundamental to the MBA program shift that we're launching in the fall is exactly the point you're talking about. I mean, MBA students typically come in. This isn't meant to be a commercial for it. It's like literally like totally tied in. Is like because I don't think we're the only school doing this. It's the school I teach at, so it's the one I know.
yeah,
But like what's an MBA degree for? It's for management for a lot of people, right? There's other things you get out of it, but
yeah,
a lot of people want to become a better manager. And one of the things we've been talking about, I said this I think to the dean a year and a half ago or whatever. I was like, can we really envision a world where the manager of the future isn't managing AI and humans? That's just the default, right? So
yeah.
that I would say that's the first thing for an organization. If you don't believe that, go learn
Mm,
because that's coming for you. Like I don't care what whether just from the productivity benefit alone, you need to be thinking that way. And then I think the second thing is, and maybe it's why I brought up the CIO thing, which was just in fun. I've interacted with plenty of fun CIOs. You know what I mean? And since you probably got an audience that's partly in Australia, I'll bring up briefly the story we talked about. We did a bunch of market research with CIOs in Australia once. And one of the CIOs said, and somewhat tongue in cheek, like, you could fit all of us in a large room. So when a vendor screws up down here, we all know,
yeah,
and no one's ever buying from them again. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I was like, well, that makes sense. It's a continent, but it's a small amount of people, right? And so the point is, though, why I bring up the CIOs again is that, but really understand the limits of where it's at right now. And the
Mm,
best, because, you're going to be bombarded with Kool-Aid from AI vendors who I'd like to even find a way to say are well-meaning, but they're probably not. They're just trying to sell their technology as fast as they could.
yeah.
Um, I think another big thing is you have to make sure that you balance the enthusiasm that you have as a business leader for AI, which because and where I'm going with this is like, let me back up slightly. As a business leader, if you do believe you're going to be managing humans and AI, you might start to get really excited because you're going to
Mm,
be like, wait a minute. So I can do more and I don't have to hire people and I can do prospecting and that stuff that the sales team hates doing. I can give that drudgery, that routine stuff, that translator, that producer stuff, and all my like guys that just kill it. I can just make them just kill it all day and they never have to talk to a CRM like ever again. I don't have to talk to a CRM ever again. I never have to do any of that. I don't have to ever write a report. I don't have to take notes on a meeting. Okay, here's the catch. At some point, you have to balance that enthusiasm with slowing it down and saying, but I understand you are all frightened every time I get excited.
mm,
And too often we don't see that. I show my students a video from I'm gonna bang on the Zoom Info CEO, but he did this video where he was like, we took this one team from 26 to 2. It was amazing. And I'm like, and I could tell what he's trying to do in the video is like get with the program, be
Yeah.
productive, be those two. I'm like, dude, but that's only part of the story, man. Those are the 24. They need direction,
Yeah.
right? And I would say the other thing is be real about where you are going size wise. Because I'll have students come to me and say, well, I think all companies should just retain all people and just retrain them. Okay. It doesn't work. I'm talking to a guy that knows sales, right? My first thing is like, well, that assumes you even have the potential to go get the revenue to retain all the people.
That's it.
And if everybody else uses AI to drop their price, well, then you got to figure out what to do with that. And like, there's all these like market dynamics, and we have
Mm.
really good discussions in the class. And they go, huh, like, okay, you're right. They can't retain everybody, but now what do we do? And I go, well, now we're actually having a real conversation, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would say the other big thing in leading is find a way to like this sounds so elemental, but honestly, I see orgs shift away from it all the time. I ask them to go do it, and I know why they don't do it, but I'm like, you got to do this. Like celebrate on a weekly basis. I mean, asking somebody to do something weekly is so hard, right? But like on a
Yeah.
weekly basis, what are you doing with AI? And here's the kicker. If you sucked at it and you blew it up and you wasted 20 minutes, celebrate that too and find a
Yeah.
way to turn that into like, well, this is what you should do next. Because we have this really weird thing where you you yes, you can train people on effective AI use. I mean, clearly I would believe you could, and I do,
Mm.
whether it's students or professionals. But at the same time, let's say you just elect not to do that. You're like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm just going to go let my people figure it out. Well, you're asking them to do that in what free time, with what guidance, with what whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, really, at some point, somebody has to shepherd their learning.
Yeah.
It's either going to be somebody external, and it's totally fine if you don't want to do that, right? I don't have plans for world domination. So, like, it doesn't have to be that. But for you to act like nobody has to shepherd their learning when you're asking them to change their entire job, which leads to my
Yeah.
last point, which is that these platforms have moved from, over the last year or so. I'm using kind of broad terms because depending on which platform you use, you might feel this was like 6 months ago or 2 days ago or 2 years ago. But they moved from being like more chat based to like, I'm going to give them work that they can work on over time. Like Claude Cowork's a really good example, right?
Yeah.
It can run longer running tasks and engage over time.
Are we
Hello?
back?
We're back. So we can pick.
Look.
I can pick that up. Let me leave a little gap, and if you're going to cut it, like I can do that. So I don't know what happened with the gods of the internet, but okay, let me back up. So I stopped with that one thing. So I'll say
It was Claude
another
co-work.
thing.
Then I heard silence.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing I think that's really important though is that you need to find a way. Now I lost my train of thought, so let me go back. Hold on a minute. That's funny. Like ah.
Well,
Um,
giving people guide rails, responsibility around their own learning, and you
right.
longer term tasks that the Claude Cowork can
Oh,
do.
right. So okay, right. So I'll say this. So the last thing I would say that I feel like you need to really look across your team and make a good decision about, and help and coach with is that some people can look at their job top down
Mm.
and they understand how to automate certain aspects of it, or they can break their job into pieces. And we know this about good sellers, for example, right?
Yeah.
Really good sellers. What if you looked at their day? It's structured. It's
Yeah.
not just chaos, right? They got a
Totally.
moment they do pipeline, they got a moment they do outreach, and they pick those moments tied to when they're going to have the most energy, the most success. Nothing's gets slipped for a long time. I used to have this doc that I wrote to sellers in my company that was like, you know, kind of the 30-day path to happiness. What has to happen every time within 30 days? What has to happen every week? But it wasn't like it all has to happen at 9 o'clock because it has to
Yeah.
depend on how you are going to deal with it. So my point is these tools have reached the point now where the maximal output for your average user, right? Not your IT department, but your average user is somebody that can actually take significant chunks of their work and automate it.
Mm.
And that's a real skill. And some people can't even see into their job well enough to understand that. But again, you don't need everybody to do that. You just need somebody who's a champion who can look at the other six sellers and say, Fred, Bob, and Mary and Stan, this thing I did last week with cowork, you can all do, and
Mm.
we can be amazingly efficient in like responding to RFPs all of a sudden. Not that
Yeah.
anybody should respond to an RFP, but I digress. But that's a different point. Uh, I shouldn't say that ever. Mostly, let's put it that way. But it depends on what you're selling, I guess. But yeah, that last bit though, I think is really key because the people who pull that off, they get a 10x multiple. They're just not
Mm.
having a quick conversation with a chatbot. They're taking
Yeah.
entire sections of their job and just dropping it into an AI. Like I'll give you one, tiny little concrete example of that. That's like a thing that I did the other day that I went, huh, I'll never do it the manual way again. Is like somebody asked me for a recommendation letter. She worked here for 10 years. And this isn't strictly like a co-work style task, but it's dealing with connected data.
Yeah.
And um, and I was like, okay, recommendation letter. Huh. And it's for an MBA, not an MBA program, but a master's program she wants to go into. She's worked here a really long time. I want to write her a really good recommendation letter. It is Friday at 4 o'clock. She needs it by Monday. We
Yeah.
could quibble. She should have given me more runway, but fine. I'm going to go write it. What could I do? I'm going to go pull up her past reviews. I'm going to think about all the things that she said she did good here in the roles that she had, which are not the same role that she's going to go get in the master's degree, the other master's degree program. And the master's degree program has a list of things that they want me to go write about. Uh, Wait a minute. Claude, can you go search for all of her reviews in my drive folder? Can you synthesize all of the stuff that I told her that was positive and negative and whatever? Can you take this other list of all the things they want me to go write about for the recommendation letter? By the way, can you use the Sean writing skill to go write this in my voice? And can you just go find all that and go do it?
Yeah.
I was sitting in the gym parking lot. 10 minutes later, I had a recommendation. And here's the thing, I give that example to students a lot. And I can see because students live in a good way for recommendation letters at the age they're at,
Yeah.
right? They want
Yeah.
that. And there's always a couple of them that go, that's wrong. That's evil. You
That's
should have wrote
right.
it.
It's
And
evil.
and I go, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's have a discussion about this because this is a bit of like thinking about the job, thinking about it a little more systemically beyond a single prompt, right? What can
Mm.
the AI do for me? And I said, ask yourself this question. Is it a better recommendation letter? And some people go, no, 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 because it wasn't from you, which is the same argument we see with AI driven music, with
Yeah.
AI driven creative, with whatever. And I go, wait a minute. Do you think I remembered every good thing she did here over 10 years? They go, no.
No.
Do you think I was able to pull all that and tie it to whatever, you know what I mean? And then we're leaving aside the time window problem, right? Because if I
Yeah.
felt pressed for time, I would truncate that and I would
Yeah.
write a couple. And I got done looking at it and I was like,
Damn.
this is good.
That's
You know
good.
what I mean? And sure, did I tune it a little bit? No, I didn't just like take it and just like ship it, but that tuning was like 3 minutes,
Mm.
right? And I felt like I had honestly a recommendation letter that was probably more honoring to her time here than my short-term retention span of whatever I
Yeah.
remembered in her last 2 to 3 reviews.
Yeah.
So,
And so the question there is, why wouldn't you use this? Because it begs the question, and it wasn't that far long ago that universities, educational institutions, and even high schools were banning students from using any form of AI because it was considered to be cheating and not their work.
well, that's an interesting question that gets harder to answer. The question underneath those procedural shifts is how do we fill young people with information that's meaningful?
Yeah.
And that gets harder the lower you go age-wise in the educational system.
Yeah.
Because what is AI going to look like when a kindergartner starts working?
Mm.
All right, anybody got a guess? I'd like to meet them. You should put them on the show next because if they know, they should
Yeah.
absolutely be on the show next, right? And like, but if Elon Musk is trying to project certain futures, that's even a harder one. I'm not even really
Yeah.
sure what that is. And so, like, but yet, aren't we supposed to put knowledge in the minds of young adults, and kids. But what knowledge is that? And it's
Mm.
easy to go, well, it's the judging, it's the deciding. Well, to be able to do that, though, you kind of have some knowledge, right?
You've got to have something,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so what are we teaching? And you can rush to, well, we teach them discernment. Okay, fine. What's the other extra 17 years of education going to be, right? You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like I mean, and that's a skill that evolves with maturity and time and data that you collected. And sure, there are things that are good proxies for it. You know, like one of my mantras, hopefully you don't ask me this at the end because I'm going to steal it. But if you said like, what's the one thing you always want people to know? It's going to be read stuff you disagree with
Yeah.
because I feel like you read stuff you disagree with, whether it changes your opinion or not in the end is immaterial, but read it all the way to the end and actually consume it. Like
Mm.
literally try this on for size for anybody listening. Whatever news channel you regularly watch, I ask you for one solid week to watch the other one. Scream at the TV if you want. I don't really care. But ask yourself after one solid week, is there anything that changed in your perceptions? Anything at all?
Mm.
That would not be a bad move. And then next try it with a whole book. But
Yeah.
so, but it's hard. There is no great answer to that. Colleges
No.
have a little get out of jail free card because we get them at the end,
Mm.
right? And so like we can just layer discernment and logic building and debate and we can jump right to the reviewer judge, we can jump right to the engagement, the strategy, right? We can jump to those things. Whereas I would be terrified to be a principal of an elementary school, which in the
Yeah.
States is like K through 8.
Mm.
I would, if I'm really looking ahead and thinking, what in the world is my curriculum in 10 years? Because I think this idea of like they just won't use AI has some relevancy, right? Like we do want people to be able to go to the gas pump and figure out what they're paying,
Yeah.
right? But there's a whole raft of knowledge we put in people's heads that I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah. It's I mean it's a fascinating thought process. Mate, I am conscious of time, but there was one question I did want to ask you, and it's completely off topic of this. And before we press record, uh, you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on. That is the AI decision team and the mastermind or the board of directors using AI to do that. Particularly relevant for leaders who perhaps are looking for mentoring or don't necessarily have a wide variety of people that they can rely upon to have a conversation with. Can you just talk a little bit about your thoughts around a decision team using AI and how that might help leaders, I guess, similar to what you just talked about before, get a different perspective, maybe get an alternative perspective so they can be more well-rounded when it comes to leading their teams or making some of these decisions and particularly in business, in B2B businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so a couple things come into play here. One, AIs for a while now have been very good at modeling the behavior of like a persona, right? And in market research, you can lose yourself in discussions about things called synthetic respondents and synthetic data. I'm not going there. That's a whole different thing. I'm not talking about using it for like market validation. What I'm talking about more is like a virtual sounding board where they take on the persona of certain people. So, like, for example, you could go into Claude, you could go into your AI of choice, but Claude's kind of my favorite of late. And you could say, help me build a skill, which is Claude's version of a GPT or a gem. And you basically, with some differences for those that are
Yeah.
like, wait, they're different. I'm like, we know they're different. We're not going to go there right now. But the so the skill that you say to the skill, like, I would like you to create. I'm going to do a tiny bit of multitasking right now and explain like what mine basically does. But you go ahead and you say, I want you to take on these personas. And when I interact with you, I want you to give me feedback as if you are these people. So, like my skill says stress test major decisions with a panel of 8 expert perspectives,
Hmm.
right? And one is an operator execution, another one is an investor, I mean, opportunity cost, another one is a CFO, financial risk, another one is a career coach, meaning identity, another one's a contrarian, devil's advocate, another one is actually a pastor theologian. I'm a Christian, so like I have that,
Yep.
voice in my head and think about how I'm going to make these decisions. Customer market voice, buyer validation, and a technologist.
Hmm.
And I can literally. like I do demos when I do training, and I'll be like, should I buy the Chicago Cubs, right? Baseball team, and and I'll run it by the decision panel just for fun, just to make a point. And it's like the CFO's like, I don't think you have the money to buy the Chicago Cubs, right? You know what I mean? And so, but it is really interesting, and it's proven by a lot of research that um this can really help you make decisions. It goes back to that multi-universe kind of thing we talked about, right? Like
Yeah.
I can have a good back and forth deep dialogue. I have a long running Claude chat, just shorted as DM, which stands for decision making. And it's like this almost year and a half long chat between me and the decision panel and decisions I'm making about the business and Fox and all this stuff that I've always, anybody's got to think about, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Do I think it's a replacement for a human? No, I've got a good buddy named Rob and a great wife named Kim. You know what I mean? And I go talk to them whenever I want. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But there's a modeling here that's really powerful. And yeah, and anybody can do it. It could be
Mm,
any decision panel you want. And you could make it as a GPT, you could make it as a gem, you could make it as a skill, and you can start small,
mm.
whatever you want, you know? So that's basically how it works.
So what we're saying is there are no longer any excuses because people will say to me, "Oh, I don't know who you go to talk to." Well, you've got the technology available to you. Think about the persona. And this goes right
Right.
back to when Napoleon Hill wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. He talked about the mastermind in that particular book. And that mastermind does not necessarily have to be people who you actually know.
Right, exactly. And you can, and this also, probably for a lot of people intuitively probably jumped here or listening is like, you could use this to practice sales conversations. When
Yeah.
I taught the B2B sales class at Fox, which I did for about a year, I had all kinds of custom GPTs. This was a year and a half ago, right? Or
Mm,
2 years ago, basically, when AI was more nascent. And I'd have the students do, you know, basically practice runs with different sales frameworks against AI platforms and different models and practice negotiation. And is that exact same as a human? Well, no, but that's not what we're arguing. What we're arguing
no.
is, do they have to basically be alone or wait to talk to a human? Or is there
Mm,
something in between that does provide meaningful training and growth? And then sure, they can pressure test that against a human any day they want.
yeah. And the key thing is it's designed to help people develop a skill, develop knowledge,
Amen.
to improve their ability to be functional in their roles and in their life. So, mate, hey, this is I can't believe it's nearly on the well, it's on the hour. Phenomenal conversation. It would be remiss of me not to ask you the future question,
Okay,
and that
fair enough.
is for a man that's been involved in AI research for a long time, and you're doing it every single day. Um, and the prolific level of change that's happening and how AI seems to be, I don't know if regenerating, but improving or whatever the terminology is in such a short period of time. What do you see the next year to 2 years being? Are you looking at that with um, optimism and the opportunities it presents, or is there some things that you're sort of having as a bit of a concern?
Oh, there's a lot in that. So I'll try to make it quick. One for the there's two ways you frame it. There's like for everybody else and for me is what I heard. So like for everybody else, um, I would say for the love of God, keep using multiple tools. I mean, so often people pick one tool, they declare a winner, and they're like, this is my $20. I'm like, no, 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 no. Just use them all. I mean, honestly, because it is so hard to predict a winner right now. And what do I think is going to happen? I I haven't actually said this directly on anybody I've talked to before because it's hard to make predictions, right? It really,
Yeah,
really is. I would say you're probably better off assuming you're going to have to change jobs than not.
yeah,
And that one binary point probably puts you on a better path
mm,
than that other person who's assuming they're not. And what does job change mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things. You could go from salesperson to pastor. You could
yeah.
go from pastor to marketer. You could go from marketer to product developer. I don't really know. Depends on who you are. As far as for me personally, I would just say, yeah, it's an exciting, interesting time. It's clearly market research has been impacted by AI in both positive and negative ways. I've lived that transition.
Yeah.
But maybe I'd end it this way. I maybe I'm a good example of, you know, there's a give and a get. There's things that have changed in market research in positive and negative ways, and it's also provided opportunities for me in other ways when it comes to teaching and educating and learning. So um, I would say I would say flow with it like that and
Yeah.
try to understand how to change in meaningful ways. But yeah, I don't know. That's
Love
where I
that.
leave it.
I love that. It's a great way to finish because you're talking about being curious, being open, not being a person of a fixed mindset, and not being worried about whatever's going to happen. You'll find a way because we're adaptable, we're
Right.
flexible. We'll find a way. It's all good. And the ones that have that attitude are the ones that will find the opportunities, who will be able to leverage the technology, who will be able to take advantage of it. As long as we're doing this for good, not for evil.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right, man. Well, thanks
So
for having me on.
no, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. For people who would like to learn more about you and connect, where's the best place for them to do that, my friend?
CascadeInsights.com. That's where you can learn about the research we do around AI or the AI training and enablement work. And, just Sean at CascadeInsights.com is the easiest way to reach me.
Awesome, mate. Absolute great conversation. Thank you. I know I've gone a little bit over time, so thank you for doing that, and all the best in your continual research, but also the work you're doing at Fox as well. So all good.
All right. Thanks again, man. All right.
Thanks,
Take
buddy.
care.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.